Je croyais que les psychiatres voulaient être considérés comme étant des docteurs.
C'est vrai, c'est pour cela que leur manuel devait avoir l'air plus scientifique.
Mais ils ne l'étaient pas. Qu'ont-ils fait alors?
Eh bien, ils ont décidé que la prochaine édition serait complètement différente. Cette décision allait changer la psychiatrie à jamais.
If you roll the clock forward to the 1970s in the United States, basically at that time psychiatry was in very poor shape for a number of reasons. First of all, it was held in very low regard by other members of the medical profession. So psychiatry was the sort of thing you did if you couldn't succeed in any other area of medicine.
And people such as Robert Spitzer in America made it very clear that the time had come essentially for psychiatrists, being doctors of medicine, to practice medicine. So if a psychiatrist was spending a lot of time dealing with people who were anxious, depressed, these dilemmas, these problems in living now essentially had to be redefined. And they were redefined as medical conditions.
And their solution to this was to come up with a manual which defined psychiatric disorders more carefully. So, hence, we have DSM-III, which is the third edition, which is published in 1980.
Sous Spitzer, les éditeurs du DSM-III ont éliminé la psychologie freudienne et ont décrété que les diagnostics psychiatriques seraient désormais purement biologiques.
Alors ils sont finalement devenus scientifiques.
Non, en fait pas du tout. D'ailleurs, les querelles politiques concernant quels troubles seraient inclus ou omis du DSM-III furent encore plus ridicules. Voici comment un psychiatre le décrit.
They would squeeze into a room which was about half the size of this one. It was much too small. And Bob would raise a provocative question, and people would shout out their opinions from all sides of the room. And whoever shouted loudest tended to be heard. My own impression is it was more like a tobacco auction than a sort of conference.
Et voici ce qu'a dit un autre membre de ce comité.
The low level of intellectual effort was shocking. Diagnoses were developed by majority vote on the level we would use to choose a restaurant. You feel like Italian, I feel like Chinese, so let's go to a cafeteria. Then it's typed into the computer. It may reflect on our naivete, but it was our belief that there would be an attempt to look at things scientifically.
Donc leur manuel diagnostique avait l'air plus scientifique, sans offrir plus de science qu'avant.
Et le nombre de troubles mentaux dans le DSM-III a grimpé à 259. Mais pour faire accepter l'idée que la psychiatrie était bien une science médicale, il leur fallait une théorie qui ait l'air très scientifique.
But with DSM-III from 1980 on, there was the progressive medicalisation of psychiatry, and the notion of chemical imbalance was invented and essentially took hold.
Hein? Quel déséquilibre?
La théorie du déséquilibre chimique. Née en 1965, elle tentait d'expliquer que la dépression pourrait résulter d'un déséquilibre parmi certaines substances chimiques cérébrales.
Vas-y, raconte.
Selon Joseph Schildkraut, si les psychotropes changent le niveau de ces substances chimiques, alors la maladie mentale doit être causée par des niveaux trop élevés ou trop faibles de ces substances.
N'est-ce pas à l'envers?
Si, pour sûr. Autant dire que si l'aspirine arrête un mal de tête, ça veut dire que les maux de tête sont causés par un manque d'aspirine.
Je vois ce que tu veux dire.
Mais c'était suffisamment convaincant pour donner à la psychiatrie et au DSM-III un air de science. Comme l'a dit Robert Spitzer,
psychiatry felt now, gee, we're more scientific, we're part of medicine.
Donc ça a marché.
Oui. Et depuis, les psychiatres et l'industrie pharmaceutique n'ont cessé de promouvoir cette théorie de déséquilibre chimique auprès des médecins et du public.
If you're one of the millions of people who live with uncontrollable worry, anxiety, and several of these symptoms for 6 months or more, you could be suffering from generalized anxiety disorder, and a chemical imbalance could be to blame.
Prestige is thought to work by affecting the levels of two chemicals in the brain.
It works to correct chemical imbalances in the brain, which may be related to symptoms of social anxiety disorder.
Cymbalta works on serotonin and norepinephrine.
Hundreds of thousands of patients have been prescribed Abilify. Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor.
Talk to your doctor. Call your doctor.
Ask your doctor about Cymbalta.
Prestige is a key in helping to treat my depression. Ask your doctor about Prestige.
You come to my office, and I say to you, well, you describe what's going on in your life and your symptoms, and I said, well, it's clear to me that you've got a chemical imbalance and we're going to write you a prescription for this. The truth of the matter is there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance.
There's no test out there that they can depend on that tells you you have a chemical imbalance.
There's actually, in fact, dozens of studies showing that there isn't any measurable imbalance. So psychiatrists will explain to patients all the time, this is just like diabetes. In diabetes, you have low insulin, we have to readjust the insulin level. In depression, you have low serotonin, we have to readjust the serotonin level. But actually, we have already proven that there's nothing wrong with serotonin levels. It's completely a myth, disproven by our own evidence.
I had a psychiatrist. He said that, in his professional opinion, this child had ADHD, a chemical imbalance of the brain. And when he was questioned on the witness stand as an expert witness for the state, he was asked if they had done an MRI. He said no. He was questioned if they had done a CAT scan. He said no. He was asked if they had done any bodily fluid check known to medical science to prove that this child had a chemical imbalance of the brain. He says no. And when he was asked how he arrived at this ADHD diagnosis, a chemical imbalance of the brain, it came down to that he had counseled and observed this child for 2 hours, and half of the time was observing. How do you arrive at a diagnosis of a chemical imbalance of the brain by talking to a child and observing them for 2 hours? You don't, okay? It's pure guesswork.
Wow, est-ce vraiment possible?
Vois pour toi-même. Voici une personne qui est allée voir plusieurs psychiatres avec une caméra cachée et a demandé un test pour maladie mentale.
Of any scientific test?
Not that I'm prepared to do this time.
So you getting that I have adjustment, what is it?
Adjustment disorder, mixed emotional features. It just means situational stress.
Right,
it's a formal diagnosis.
But I'm saying, just where do you get that from?
I take you at face value.
In terms of diagnosis, there's no way that I can x-ray or project or allow.
So it's very hard to have anything to measure. Because whatever's going wrong, it's happening in there, and we just can't go in and open up somebody's skull and scoop something out to measure.
Right now, we don't have an x-ray or a blood test. That doesn't mean that the diagnosis is not clear.
The diagnosis for insurance, and I'm not really trying to think too much in terms of diagnosis. I don't really see that as my main job here to make the diagnosis, except to give something to the insurance that's reasonably accurate.
But we don't even really know what's going wrong in the brain. So all the things that we found were found by accident.
Je suis sidéré. Le diagnostic psychiatrique est basé purement sur l'opinion individuelle.
Quoi qu'il fasse, il se trompe. La BBC a même fait une émission où 10 volontaires, 5 considérés comme normaux et 5 déjà diagnostiqués comme mentalement malades, furent observés par 3 fameux experts en santé mentale et ils ont dû dire qui était qui.
Oh là là.
Regarde ça.
We think that it's likely that you've had a history of bipolar disorder. Is that correct?
You're wrong.
Okay.
We've come to the conclusion that at some time you've been diagnosed with a mood disorder.
You're wrong.
We were wondering whether at some point in your life maybe that you had suffered from a significant psychiatric problem of some kind or other.
No.
Not at all?
You are wrong.
All right, okay.
3 wrong diagnoses in a row. After a whole week of observation, the panel have identified just 2 out of 5 disorders.
Tu parles d'une science.
Ça, c'est sûr.